Hello, Forecaster here again, and we are back for episode 73, and I have had some epiphanies and some issues. So, in the last episode, I complained how the information panels, the 5x5x5 or 5x5 reactor sensor location card, didn't display how much time was left of the fuel. And later I realized that there may be a way around that, sort of. So I made a few more sensor kits, and I went down to the reactor and I removed the redstone port temporarily so I could see the reactor inside, and I used one of the sensor cards on the reactor, and I got a normal reactor sensor location card. So I can put this in with the 5x5 card in the information panel, and I would get both sets of information from the cards, and the one of them has the on-off status turned off because I don't need two of those, but I now have the fuel time left as well as the other information, which is great. Now, a strange thing you may be noticing is that this panel is working from here with no upgrades in it. As you can see, this is an upgrade slot for range upgrades, and there are currently none. I believe that may be because we are somewhere above the reactor, and the mod just doesn't take the height difference into account when calculating distance. It just goes by the X and Z coordinates. So that's probably why, because in the last episode when I put this outside the reactor in the corridor, it didn't work. It said out of range. But this is fine, I guess. It's cheaper. I thought I would need a bunch of those range upgrades to have it work up here, but apparently not. Now I'm going to take this and take one of these, and because we're going to need these shortly. Now here are the reactor components I had before, except not really, because these are new. The other ones had stored some heat from the old reactor, and that means you cannot use them in a fluid-cooled reactor. You can't take a component that has heat it's gained in an EU reactor and put it in a fluid-cooled reactor. I tried cooling them down before, but either it was really slow or it wasn't doing anything because it took quite a long time and nothing seemed to be happening. So I simply destroyed them and spawned in new ones, which are these, just so you know. Now I would like to upgrade some of these, specifically these heat vents, and the way I would do that would be to put one in a crafting table like this and surround it by copper plates, which would turn it into a reactor heat vent. Except it doesn't. As you can see, the server says this is not a valid recipe. The client thinks it is, but the server won't let me take it out. Now this may be because of metadata, which really shouldn't be a factor since these the whole point of these is metadata, which they use to store heat. So that would be really weird. There may be a bug or something. So again, I'm simply going to destroy them, these two heat vents, along with the copper plates, and spawn in the upgraded ones. we can get rid of these. Now, I have a bunch of gold plates. The next upgrade is from heat vents, reactor heat vents, to overclocked heat vents. And I thought this would be a straight upgrade at first, but when I read about these on the wiki, these apparently are very good at taking heat from the reactor, but they don't vent all of it every tick. So they will take in more heat that they can get rid of, which is bad because that means they will eventually overheat and be destroyed. So if you don't know anything about the Industrial Crafts nuclear reactors, the fuel will produce heat, and the heat is let's head down to the reactor. The heat, the fuel rods will output the heat partially into the reactor core itself, and some of it to surrounding components, if I recall correctly. And if you just put some fuel rods in a reactor by themselves, like this for example, all the heat will be going into the reactor core, and it will eventually overheat and explode. To deal with this, and to actually get something out of it, because the heat when it's inside the core doesn't actually do anything except cause an explosion eventually, like I said. To do something with the heat, you're going to have to get it out of the core and vent it. And to do that, you need heat vents at the very least. And you also have heat exchangers and coolant cells. So the heat vents, depending on the type, will take some heat from the reactor, some from surrounding components, and they will simply vent it out. Now, technically this just destroys it, really. But what would you say? In the world, this will, in the case of a fluid-cooled reactor, the heat is going to be vented out into the cold coolant that is passing through the reactor. In an EU reactor, it is simply turned into energy automatically. And then the hot coolant is returned out, of course. It seems there was some heat in the core, apparently. May have accidentally given the reactor a signal at some point. As you can see, I put the facade here with the and put the signal receiver in its place. I made a crowbar, a reinforced one. Anyway, the heat exchangers simply move heat around. They either take heat from the core and surrounding components, and they will try to balance it out. So they will move heat, take heat from the highest point and move it to the lower points. And they will do this every tick until the heat is balanced, which it pretty much never will be at least not when the reactor is running. Coolant cells are simply storage. They will store heat and they don't do anything with it. I don't think they will interact with anything. You need heat exchangers to get heat out of a coolant cell. So that's pretty much how reactors work. The reactor heat vents will take heat from the core itself and vent it out. There are also, as you can see, other types of heat vents. The advanced heat vent is the fastest heat vent. It's pretty much an upgrade of this basic heat vent. I think it will. Yeah, it takes 2 of these. So this will take some heat from the core, some from surrounding components, and just vent it out. But it does more than this. As you can see, though, it costs a diamond, and I don't have any diamonds at the moment. The component heat vent is a heat vent that takes no heat from the core. It only takes heat from surrounding components. And then we have a few different heat exchangers, heat exchangers. We have the reactor heat exchanger, which is basically like the reactor heat vent. It won't interact with other components. It just takes heat from the core and pulls it into itself. So you need other heat exchangers to get the heat out of this, or say a component heat vent. So you could either have a reactor heat vent, pull heat from the core and vent it, or you could have a reactor heat exchanger surrounded by 4 component heat vents. So this would pull out the heat from the core, and these would take the heat from the heat exchanger and vent it. Now, I'm not sure, I don't know what build I'm going for. If you like, you can go on the Industrial Craft 2 forums and find the thread about nuclear engineering or something like that, and you will find reactor layouts there. There's also a program you can download that will simulate a reactor, where you can put in components and slots and then run a simulation and see what happens if the reactor explodes, or if which components break, and so on. So I'm just going to have this like this for the moment, and we are going to set the signal receiver to output a redstone signal, and we should see that we start producing hot coolant because the reactor is now running. So we can leave it like that for a little bit. Now if we see here, we can see that the reactor is outputting well, things. I want to leave this here for later. I intend to have another one of these with a regular. This has the 5x5 card in it. I want to put in this one with a normal card in it so I can see the fuel time when I'm down here. But we can see we're producing hot coolant. Now, when let's try decreasing this until it turns on and see if we can find out what heat level the reactor is on. So it's not at 100. I don't know if it updates when you close the interface or not. It seems to be kept extremely low. That's good, I suppose. It's not outputting that much heat right now. You can see it's producing 20 heat units per second. The most we can process at the moment is 80 heat units per second, because that's how many heat exchangers I have in the fluid heat exchanger. What's they called? That's not what they're called. Let's get in here and check. Heat conductors, yeah. So I have 8 heat conductors, so I can process 80 heat per tick is what it is, and the Stirling generator can receive 100 per tick at least. I don't know if there's actually a limit. But you of course have to find something that outputs more to test it. Anyway, let's shut down the reactor. Let's get some cells. This is a new backpack, by the way, added to Forecaster's backpacks by Forecaster, or by Vexados, I mean. Dang it. As you can see, it costs 2 toolboxes to make, and it has replaced my old toolbox, and it actually has fewer slots than these 2 toolboxes would have. I think the toolbox has 9 slots or something, one of these rows. So that would be 18 slots in total. But this only has 15, so there's 3 less storage slots. I prefer this though, because for one, it just takes up 1 slot in my inventory, which is obviously a huge plus. And also, it will take things that the toolbox will not. For example, the obscurator, I think, should go in the toolbox, but it's not configured to do so. There are currently a couple of drawbacks though. For example, the ore scanners will not go in here. And the EU reader will not either. This is a bug, however, and have already been fixed. I just haven't updated to that version yet. So what was it doing? Oh, yeah. Let's take some coolant out. Hot coolant. You can see these are still... heat is still moving around, but and it's being put into the coolant. I'm not sure why I can't input these cells, but that should work. Maybe. Does it eat it? Please tell me it doesn't eat it. 5. Do that. Do we have 6? Yeah, we do. Okay, it doesn't just eat the fluid. That's good. Let's take our hot coolant, a small amount of hot coolant. Dang bats. And go into this room here and try out the heat exchanger. So if I put the cell in here, it's going to take the coolant in, and it's going to extract the heat, turn it into coolant. It's going to output the heat into the Stirling generator, which is going to turn it into energy, and the energy is going to be output into the cable. Presumably something is using power. And then we get the cold coolant back, which is good. And now apparently it can't output any more heat. There it goes. Because it was... Alright. These cells don't fill up all at once. They fill up gradually. So that's basically how that works. Seems the power is being used by something, which means that something is draining power upstairs. Is this still going? It is. Let's put a few of these in there. Still weird that I can't put the cells in these slots. Pretty strange. You can put it in this way though. The reactor currently is not outputting because I have removed the ejector upgrade while poking at things. I don't have it on me, so I'm not sure where I put it, but I put it somewhere, probably. But yeah, that's how the reactor is going to work. It seems... okay, seems the heat has almost run out, which is... it's a good thing. Perhaps I grabbed a little too much coolant. Let's... can put it back in here. And then we can take this coolant and put it in here, and it's going to be processed. And now it's going to they're going to fill all at once because it can't partially fill an entire stack. I wonder what happens. I'm going to do an experiment. If I disconnect this cable here, this buffer is going to fill up, and I want to know if it stops processing coolant once it's full. So now it's full, it stopped receiving heat, and the exchanger has stopped processing coolant. So that means that if the energy has nowhere to go, which would mean that the turbine is providing enough power at the moment for lights and such, then this tank will fill up, and then we can detect that here and send a signal somewhere into a signal controller that I'm going to put probably here, to shut off the boiler. The turbine. No, the reactor. There we go. That took longer than it should have. Now the power is being used up by something. It's probably sneaking in a little now and then when the CSU empties, I would guess. Still haven't done any of this, which I probably should get to. Let's talk a little about my plans for the near future, because I haven't done that enough, probably, because I get kind of distracted. But the current plan is to finish the reactor stuff, get the reactor set up as a reliable backup power source. Then I will continue working on the factory upstairs, by which I mean the auto crafting system using the Open Computers computer. And then once that is done, I intend to continue working on the railway, which I have neglected for quite a while. So yeah, that's pretty much the plan, and hopefully it will I will get to execute it and not be distracted by more things. But I want to finish. I need to finish the reactor because I want the power, because the ore processing system is pretty taxing on my current power system. The boiler can't keep up with it, as I've explained before. And I want to finish the factory before I continue on the railway, because it's going to make it easier to make more tracks. Why did I do that? Which is a very good thing, because making tracks can be a little fiddly. It's going to save me time to have the factory do it for me, and hopefully it won't take too long to make the factory. I'm going to be making a bunch of computer components off camera, of course, because that's extremely fiddly. Probably not that interesting to have to watch. And yeah, so, but right now I'm going to probably be making more reactor components, and perhaps experiment a little off camera. And then in the next episode we are going to have a look at that, see the results of that, and see the reactor coming online properly. I also need to make the remaining railcraft components for the control system, and we are probably also going to test the failsafe, the overheating shutoff, which I've decided to have as a manual reset system, by which I mean that once the failsafe engages, because the reactor gets too hot, it's going to shut it off permanently until I come and reset it. And the reason I want to do this, of course, is so that it doesn't keep overheating, and I will also have it alert me that it has overheated, so that I can come down and fix it. And the likely reason it's overheating is because I have a bad component configuration in it. So I would want to change it to something that hopefully works a little better. So yeah. So immediately fix the remaining components for the reactor, then factory, then railway, and with that I'll see you in the next episode.